So 2 years ago, I made a video about starting a business here in Sweden. So it has been a while. I talked mainly about opening a limited company, an aktiebolag here in Sweden. So there's a lot of details in this video, so make sure to watch it. But in today's video, I want to give you 3 options of starting a business here in Sweden, 3 different ways you can start a business. One definitely includes starting a limited company in aktiebolag here, but there are 2 other options I want to talk about in this video, because every now and then I get a question, especially on the other video, what it takes to start a business here in Sweden. So I thought I'd make another video to give you more insights. There's certainly more options, but I would say these 3 ways are the most common options, especially if you are just one person and you want to start your business here in Sweden. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to my newsletter and also grab your little ebook to find out if Sweden is the right fit for you. You will find the link in the description down below. Let's get started. Okay, so the first option is actually using a third-party company, and I found 2 very common ones, very known ones here in Sweden. They're called Freelance Finance and Cool Company. I actually have notes here, so every now and then I will look at my screen to give you more information. So this option is really the easiest, the simplest, the quickest way to have a business here in Sweden. So for example, if you need to write invoices because you have Swedish clients or clients from abroad and you want to get paid, then this option is really convenient. The big disadvantage of this option is that you pay quite a bit of money. So there is not much flexibility when you have this, and I personally would recommend this option as an interim. For example, if you just move to Sweden and you just want to quickly get your money basically legally by paying taxes here in Sweden, then this is a great option. Or maybe even if you don't know if you really want to start a business, you want to test out the waters, then you could also use this company or one of those 2 companies. So let's have a look at the websites just so you see a little bit what it is about, if you haven't understood completely how they actually can help you. And you will find all the information on the website, but it's good obviously for the purpose of this video to go through it a little bit so you just know a little bit more and know where to research. So the first website you can have a look at is Freelance Finance. So they do give information in English, which is quite convenient if you're coming from abroad. So I'm scrolling down a little bit to, have the description of how it works. You can go through that, which is definitely very useful. But I wanted to scroll down here to an example they give, so you actually have a better picture of how much you have to pay when you send an invoice to a client. So let's say you have here those 10,000 Swedish krona you want to invoice. How much do you actually get of these 10,000 Swedish krona? And first of all, you have the administration fee for Freelance Finance, and that is 6%. And then on the right side, you have the income tax and the employer's contribution, the corporation tax basically you have to pay. And you can see the number is quite high, 4,214. So that's already nearly half gone. And then in the middle, you see your total compensation. Although you will not get paid 5,112 Swedish krona, you still have those 309 Swedish krona as a pension deducted. And of course, it's your money, but you will get it when you retire. So this money you will not get right now. So in total, you will get paid 4,802 Swedish krona out of those 10,000 Swedish krona. So that is less than half. So that hurts a little bit. There is quite a bit of, deduction here. So that's definitely a downside. But if you, want to have a legal invoice and pay your taxes, then this is the best way if you don't want to go with the other 2 options, which I will talk now more in this video. But yeah, there is Cool Company. Just a quick overview. It's pretty much the same. I think they also have the same administration fee. There are I think a little bit lower, 5.98%. But yeah, it's pretty much the same. They have this example as well. When you have 10,000 you invoice, then you will get 4,803 paid out basically as your salary. So maybe one more question to clarify is if you need a Personnummer to actually register with those companies. Honestly, a Personnummer is making your life always easier. But I understand, especially if you moved here just recently and you don't have your Personnummer, you're waiting for it, for example, and you want to get started, then you know there are ways around it. There's a bit of an information on the website, on the Cool Company website, that you actually can register without a Personnummer, but you will need a coordination number. So that's normally a number you get before you get your actually Personnummer. And you have to provide a few things like a documentation certifying registration for income tax and a copy of your passport. And if your passport is not from EU, you will have to submit a copy of your work or residence permit. You have to have some form of permit to live in Sweden, you know, so you cannot come here and start a business and then basically say, this is your permit, your business. So there are some legal formalities you have to take care of before you know, invoice or start a business or even being a sole trader. So personally, I would treat this as an interim solution. When you haven't had set up your business in another way, then you can certainly already use this company and invoice and, you know, pay your taxes and everything is legal, but then you want to register your business in a different way. And I'm talking about the other two options now. The second option in my video would be to register an enskild firma, which is basically being a sole trader, having an individual company. And here the advantages are that it's super easy to set it up. You don't need any startup costs. You can just register your business as a sole trader, and basically you can make all the decisions and everything you earn is yours, and you're paying income tax on what you earn. But the biggest disadvantage, or yeah, I would say the biggest, and then there's something else, but yeah, you are personally liable for all debts and obligations, potentially risking your personal assets. So if anything goes wrong, then you are personally liable. And that's being a sole trader. The bookkeeping is quite simple, but you need to keep track of like separating your business and your personal finances. And then also compared to basically being an employee, and you can be an employee in your own company as a limited company as well, but basically you don't receive any sick pay or holiday pay. So you kind of need a private insurance. Or obviously you can also just live with not being paid on the days you are sick or you are on holiday. So if you factor that into your planning, then that's also okay. But just to compare it directly with a limited company, that actually requires a startup capital of 25,000 Swedish krona. But the good thing is that it will be in your bank account and you can actually use it. So the money is still yours. It's not that you pay for it and you don't, you know, get it back or anything. It's actually your money. You just need it as a startup capital. And an Aktiebolag, a limited company, involves more administrative work. So personally, I would recommend having an accountant. Of course, this is like an extra expense, you have to pay for it, but especially if you don't speak Swedish, like for me it was a no-brainer to get an accountant, because I not only have to do accountancy, which, you know, it's not my expertise, I would need to read everything in Swedish and translate it and everything. Even I think my Swedish will not be as good like even in a few years, so it was just a no-brainer to have an accountant and just factor this in that you have to pay for him or her. But it offers significant advantages such as limited personal liability compared to sole trader, and then also better tax options, and depending on your business you get a bit more credibility as a limited company. So yeah, that is kind of the direct, very simple comparison, sole trader with limited company. What are the liabilities? you know, how to handle expenses. Actually, let's take an advantage with expenses, because that was also my question. Is it better to have like a limited company or sole trader? How do they deal with expenses? And I put an example here on the screen. You have a bit more advantages with a limited company because the expenses you have as a sole trader, they might be a bit more limited. I mean, you can have business related costs like office supplies and equipment and travel from your taxable income deducted. However, since your business income is taxed as personal income, you might end up paying a higher tax. So there are restrictions, especially for expenses that are partly personal, like a home office. The tax benefits might not be as significant. So you have more deductions for a limited company. You can deduct a wider range of expenses, including your own salary, pension contributions, and more substantial business costs. So that is quite a bit of a difference to sole trader. And you can also reclaim VAT on purchases. For example, if you buy like a laptop, something bigger, the advantage is a bit bigger, right? And then also you kind of pay lower taxes because the deductions reduce the company's taxable income, which is taxed at a lower corporate rate, meaning you pay less in taxes overall. So let's have an example of that. So let's say you receive a 20,000 Swedish krona payment for a project as a sole trader. And within this project, you basically have like a business expense, could be anything, software, office supplies, but it's like 5,000. But it's 5,000 Swedish krona. So after deducting the 5,000 expenses, you're left with 15,000 in taxable income. And then the tax rate, so the 15,000 Swedish is taxed as personal income as a sole trader. And that could range from 30 to 50% depending on the total income of the year. So the more you earn, the more taxes you pay. But let's say for simplicity, it would be 30%. Then you would pay 4,500 in taxes on those 15,000 Swedish krona. And then when we compare it with the limited company, so it's the same amount, you receive 20,000 Swedish krona payment for a project. And then you deduct those 5,000 expenses, which leaves a profit of 15,000. And then basically you pay corporate tax on this profit at a rate of 20.6%. So at the moment, the corporate tax rate in Sweden is 20.6%. And you can see over the last decades, it really came down. It was much higher. Maybe I can put like a little graph here if I can find it. But yeah, at the moment it's 20.6%, and that definitely is less than the 30% as a sole trader, and maybe it could be even more as a sole trader, 30 to 50%. So then the company would pay 3,090 Swedish krona in taxes on the profit of those 15,000 Swedish krona. And if the expense even included VAT, the company could reclaim it, reducing costs even further. So again, you have a bit more flexibility with a limited company, especially when it comes to expenses. Everything on the sole trader side is treated as an income. You can deduct your expenses, of course, but you will still tax, the profit, which is probably your salary or whatever, will still be taxed accordingly. So there's more flexibility with expenses, and then obviously all the other advantages and disadvantages apply, which we talked already in this video. And option 3 would be to start a limited company, an aktiebolag here in Sweden. Again, I made another video about it where I really go into detail how to set up, your business, what you have to do, what the timeline was. So it was my personal experience, but there's a lot of detail in it already. But there's a few things I didn't mention in that video, so I'm just covering it here. So make sure to watch that other video. But for example, getting a bank to open a business account for your company, that might be the biggest challenge for some, especially if you don't have a personnummer. So it depends a lot sometimes if you have a personnummer or not. But in general, it is possible to open your bank account without a personnummer. There's something called samordningsnummer, which is the coordination number I mentioned earlier. So if you have that as a basically interim number, then it is also possible to open up a business account with a bank. But in general, really reach out to all the banks you research, the main banks here in Sweden. And even if you have been unsuccessful with certain people at a bank, try to, reach out another day, try to reach another person, maybe another branch, because it is really possible to start a business bank account. But, for some people, it's just easier to say no and say like, okay, they need a personnummer, so therefore they cannot open a bank account for you. But it is possible. Like, it's just like some people just want to have a straightforward, easy way to help people. Sounds a bit weird, but it is the truth, So you just have to put a little bit more extra effort into finding the right person who can help you set up a business bank account. And then in general, they will ask you for things like identification or documentation, a passport, for example, a proof of address, business registration documents from the Swedish Companies Registration Office, which is called Bolagsverket. Or you might even have to provide information about your business, such as a business plan, financial forecast, or details about your expected transactions. So there's a few things they need, and it sounds quite a lot, but you just fill in the forms one after another. I remember I just had a very short description of what my business is about and how I make money, and then just forecasts, which, their forecast, it doesn't have to be true. Like, even if in 1 year, 2 years, you're not making exactly the money you put in the forms, that's absolutely no problem. It's just for them to have an orientation. And then a few things about a limited company as well. Like, I mentioned it a little bit, but you can basically have your own salary. You can be an employee in your company and take your salary. And this is subject to personal income tax and social security contributions. But you can also take dividends, which are taxed at a lower rate than a salary, for example, but are not deductible for the company. So there's a few rules in place. And again, if you have an accountant, it will be so much easier to really understand these things. And then there's the pension contribution. So again, you are a company and you are an employee at the same time. So when it comes to pension, you can take the contribution for your pension from your salary, a certain percentage, and then your company can match it. And for the company, it's basically an expense, but you personally, pay into your pension. So that's quite good. You don't really have that as a sole trader. So administrative responsibilities, we talked about this. There's a few things you need to do as a limited company. I'm not going into detail. Again, your accountant would really be able to help you here. Like, my accountant always tells me how much VAT I have to pay every 3 months, or any other fees are due, taxes I need to pay. So that really comes from your accountant, or you're savvy enough to figure out this yourself, but then also in Swedish. Liability and risk, we talked about that. It's also a bit different for limited company. You have a limited personal liability compared to the sole trader, which is where you are 100% liable personally. Then, of course, another thing which might not be relevant for you, but if you ever want to transfer your company to, your children or anyone else, a limited company can do that. As a sole trader, you can't really do that. And then if you need any funding, depending on your company, then it's more likely you get funding as a limited company. Even if you're just a one man or one woman show, funding is more likely when you're a limited company. So this is an overview of these 3 options. And actually, as part of the limited company, there's something you could do as well, which could be a bit easier. And that is something people mentioned in the comments of my other video. So I didn't know that at the time, but there is something called a shelf company. So basically what it is, you can buy an existing Aktiebolag and AB in Sweden. So you don't have to go through the process of registering that business. But this business was only registered but hasn't really started operating. So you can buy that. And actually there is a company which can help you with that, and it's called Yurio. I can have a link in the description below. I just found it randomly when I was researching it, and they, for example, would help you with the whole process for a fee, of course. As far as I know, it costs around 6,000 Swedish krona to get that existing limited company. So you pay a little bit more, that's the disadvantage, but the advantage is that the process is really so much shorter. Within days probably you have your limited company set up. You still pay your 25,000 Swedish krona as a startup capital, so that has not changed, but yeah, on top of that you pay 6,000 Swedish krona. So this is something you can look into if you need a quicker process setting up your limited company. And just in general, in Sweden actually you get some advice, some business help for free. So for example, if you live in Stockholm, there is a website you can go to and you can have business advice, different people from different industries, and that's totally for free. And normally you can look that up in your municipality. So normally every commune has some sort of support. But also there's another website called Nyföretagarcentrum. So I will leave a link down in the description below. It's also like a support group with free advice, starting a business here in Sweden. So there's a few resources you can tap into and use it basically to your advantage. But I hope you liked this video, and if you have any further questions, let me know in the comments down below. Let's see you in my next video. Hej då!